It's been almost a year since my last killer tier list, and a lot has changed. From 4 new strong killers, to various killers getting significant buffs. This is my updated tier list, so let's not waste any more time. Let's start with the D tiers. Killers that have no chance against a competent squad, and the only way to win is if they straight up are bad or make a huge mistake you can capitalize on. The Skull Merchant is still the exact same pile of trash she was 1 year ago when the developers gutted her to destroy her kill rate while they design a rework, which has not arrived yet and instead got delayed even further. Her power is literally half as powerful as before, and she was a B tier at best back in the days, and her strongest build currently is just a glorified M1 killer that can become stealthy when placing a drone and sometimes catches survivors playing with their monitors off. Because of that, there is genuinely no reason to use this killer unless you want to get mediocre results at best, and even if you do become a great Skull Merchant player, there is no point, since she will get a rework sometime in the future. My personal advice is to just not play her unless you wear a Skull Merchant main. Save your money, don't buy her, and wait for the rework, because she is designed by the devs officially to suck. It wouldn't be a killer tier list without having Trapper as one of the weakest killers. His trap power simply cannot keep up with the fast-paced design of the current game. You need an entire build dedicated to slowing generators down, and the best add-ons which have high rarity if you want a chance at winning against competent survivors. Only then does Trapper become at most a B tier, but asking casuals to constantly use iridescent add-ons is not viable. Even his strongest playstyle, which was locking down the basement, is now nerfed, as survivors get anti-camp progress when you defend it. New maps are designed without any decent spots to place traps, and if you have a smart survivor, then all they have to do is chase you around and close your traps, rendering you powerless. Trapper needs a complete rework or a secondary type of trap if he wants any chance of leaving the D tiers, but considering the devs are happy with him being so simple, we most likely will keep seeing him in the low tiers. Despite the buffs, Ghostface is sadly my last pick for the D tiers, and it's all because of how good survivors have become. The devs wanted a true stealth killer, and he for sure works against survivors that are not very attentive, but against competent survivors that constantly keep track of your location, body block you while you carry to remove the stuck progress, or reveal you constantly while you are chasing someone else, you basically have no chance. Ghostface is very map dependent, which is now harder to pull off as he thrived on indoor maps, so you cannot play on them guaranteed with offerings. He also needs a completely different playstyle to work that does not transfer to any other killer, as you need a very high understanding of the macro if you even want a chance against strong survivors, ambushing survivors when they least expect it from weird angles, and even then, it's not enough against a squad that is telling your location on the map using the clock system on Discord. This is, in my opinion, one of the easiest killers to bully in the entire game, and there is nothing you can do against survivors that are playing with the intention of making you miserable, unless you are just an above average killer player, by which point you could have won with any other killer in the game. Next up, we have the C tiers. These killers can win in most matches, but get demolished by competent survivors, even if you play well, so you depend on their mistakes to win. And beginning with this tier, we have the Doctor, who got a big hit to his power thanks to the new palette filler density increase from last patch. Just like Trapper, his power is not well suited for the fast pace of the current game, as all survivors have to do is just pre-drop pallets, hold W, and waste your time while you shock them 3 times just to get 1 hit, when killers like Ghoul can get that same hit with the press of a button for free. He does have insane tracking, but it doesn't matter if you know where they are when it takes you 5 years to reach their spot because they held the W key. Doctor also has no add-ons that can help him out, as his best are the discipline add-ons which just make him feel better. A mistake can give survivors extra time in chase, and unless you are great at Doctor, you will be making a lot of mistakes, giving survivors time for free. And now, with a higher density of pallets than ever, you have to use your power more. A power that slows you down for each use, that requires good ping and perfect timing, and at best, gives you just 1 hit that you have to follow up or else they will heal themselves in 16 seconds, completely wasting your pressure. The Legion are next, and no amount of running will help them catch up to survivors that know the counterplay to this killer is to split up and not mend the moment you get hit, but instead start mending in a safe spot until the killer is out of the frenzy. They might be amazing in 2 vs 8, but they still suck against good survivors. The 5th hit is a very rare occurrence, so you will have to play the majority of your chases as an M1 killer, and considering they added even more filler palettes on the maps, this means you will have a harder time performing well. They are still fun to play against casuals, but funnily enough, now with the heal speeds being so fast, survivors actually barely lose time if they decide to heal, so even one of his biggest slowdowns got nerfed. The pig got some nice buffs back then to her ambush attack as well as her crouching ability, so she is stronger than before, but not enough to make her competent against survivors that know how to play against her and just leave loops, making her ambush useless. Her biggest asset was slowing the match down with the traps and catching survivors off guard with her stealth while they were injured, but this is now almost impossible as the healing meta allows survivors to heal themselves with resurgence of hook and still have plenty of time to take out the head traps, so no longer do they feel any pressure and no longer can you punish them to tunnel. And if it takes you that long for the first chase, which most likely it will if survivors are decent, you basically already lost if survivors are competent and decide to gen rush you with stacked toolboxes, as there is genuinely nothing you can do in that situation. She is, at best, still an M1 killer with one of the worst stealth powers in the game that needs to get downs in order to have her slowdown kick in, and M1 killers are struggling a lot in this current meta. The Hag used to be rated quite higher in my last tier list, and honestly she still can if you play against survivors that make too many mistakes, but against a solid team, she is almost powerless, and what doesn't help is that her hit and run power got significantly nerfed as survivors can heal very fast now, and Franklin's demise, one of the best perks for her, also got nerfed hard. And unlike a lot of the newer killers that have insane mobility and normal move speed, Hag is 4.4, so you have to use your power if you want any success, because chasing normally is not a good idea unless you are playing Chase Hag, which requires an iridescent add-on. With survivors having 70-second timers on the hook, they also feel no pressure to save like before, and now that survivors are better on average, it also means more of them finally know that you can remove her traps on the ground. For that reason, if you're playing against weaker survivors, you can still feel like a monster, especially against those that are altruistic, but against good squads, you will most likely be bullied. This doesn't even take into account the fact that now she has various bugs on her power that make her feel worse to play. This is for sure not a meta that Hag can thrive on, and I would go as far as to say that this is the worst she has ever been since release, because at least back then, she could camp and tunnel off hook. The next tier are the B tiers, the biggest category on this video. These killers are balanced for the most part, but can struggle against survivors with stacked builds that are competent and know how to counter the killers unless you lock in completely and sweat a lot. Sadako barely escapes the C tier well, all because she can be an absolute monster in 2-floor maps and if you use a condemned build. But overall, she is very weak as she is just a stealth M1 killer that reveals her position through walls thanks to the lullaby and is powerless if survivors know that all they have to do is pick up tapes to disable her TVs, which also disables her map mobility. In my opinion, her biggest base kit asset is the fact that she can eat through stuns thanks to her completely ignoring pallets while they manifested, so that can help you if you decide to bring a full chase build. But outside of that, she is still very lacking, and this problem was not fixed in any of her reworks. She is basically a glorified M1 stealth killer that requires very good macro knowledge if you want to have any success with her. Against clueless survivors, you will win a lot, but competent teams will truly test your skill. I will say, her TV positions are much better than before, as they finally fixed the problem of chests taking priority over killer spawnables. This makes her map mobility stronger, gives her more possibilities to condemn survivors, and is objectively a buff that I needed to mention. which is my reasoning for Sadako no longer being a C tier. The Dredge is the first killer outside of Doctor that actually has an anti-loop power with the Remnant, but it is one of the worst anti-loops in the entire game, as they can be easily avoided just by leaving the loop, which is now easier than ever thanks to the addition of more filler palettes, and thus the reason I ranked them lower than in the past year. If instead of palettes they added more lockers, it would actually make Dredge kinda decent, as its map traversal is insane on certain maps. But on others, which are the majority, the Dredge is not that good, very predictable, and Nightfall only helps against survivors playing on the console on the TV in the living room and survivors that still haven't learned the maps yet. On top of that, Dredge benefited a lot from survivors being injured, as Nightfall would recharge faster for each survivor in this state, and it would help Dredge catch them off guard with a good use of teleport. But of course, with the healing meta, survivors will be healthy in no time, preventing this killer from playing in a hit and run style as efficiently as you could before. The one good thing saving Dredge is its snowball capabilities when using very good builds and taking advantage of Nightfall, which can be brutal on certain maps. However, despite that, the locker locks are a huge hindrance that is very annoying and slows you down a lot. Competent survivors can completely counter the Remnant with teamwork, and attentive survivors will know and predict any of the teleport tricks you try to do on them. The Demogorgon has always been the pinnacle of balance, as this is a killer that is not weak, not oppressive, fun to play for both sides, and has everything you need: tracking, mobility, and anti-loop. Yet despite all of this, Demogorgon has been outclassed by many other killers and is no longer in the middle of the tier list, and the reason is simple. Demogorgon is not busted like the kits of newer killers. Its shred anti-loop power is okay, but doesn't compare to an anti-loop like from the Xenomorph, and its mobility is also limited as it has to set the portals manually and then defend them from survivors closing them. And the funniest part is that the Demogorgon is actually the best it has ever been in terms of raw power, as it got some very nice quality of life changes to the portals, making them actually decent and fast. It just shows how much the game has evolved for the competitive side, how strong survivors are now compared to before, and how power crept old releases are with all the new reworks and new killers with bloated powers that completely overshadow old chapters. I will say that I do feel like with the new filler palettes, since most of them are round and short, make Demogorgon shred attack worse, as it benefited a lot from long and straight loops. The Knight is another killer that is pretty balanced overall, as long as you ignore the bugs. If played right, he is an absolute nightmare in terms of macro, able to harass various spots in the map at the same time, and the recent buffs to his path power made him much less add-on dependent than before, allowing for snipes naturally. He also has the anti-loop ability of breaking pallets with the Carnifex, a great slowdown thanks to the Jailer taking a lot of time from the survivors and almost free hits if you're using the assassin right. While his double tap ability is gone, it was heavily compensated on his macro aspect, but you are forced to be good at it, because otherwise, if you play him like a normal killer expecting free hits, you won't get it against good survivors that know how to loop the guards or that bait the pallet drops, so you use Carnifex for nothing. Add to that the insane amount of bugs that are still not fixed to this day, which you will have to fight along with competent survivors like Jailer taking ages to chase survivors or guards being stuck on obstacles. And you can see how a killer that could have the potential of an A tier that can be very oppressive is just mediocre because of the balanced decisions and lack of playtesting and priority on bug fixing. Leatherface now has to deal with more filler palettes than before, removing big dead zones on the map, which were places where this killer was an absolute beast. But the good thing is that you can chew them still with your chainsaw, even though it will take you a lot of time compared to before. Since he is an insta-down killer, you can confirm a kill in the endgame, which is a huge benefit against competent teams as it completely removes the guaranteed saves they can do. However, as much as I want to put this killer higher, you still have to depend on perks like Bamboozle in order to help in certain loops, and also you need certain add-ons if you want to win against the best of the best, as without them, the chainsaw is not as lethal. If you make mistakes with it, you will also be severely more punished than with other chase-oriented killers, as colliding on something will waste a lot of your crucial time which is more valuable than ever in this fast-paced meta. Additionally, lockers can counter this killer if survivors are good and know the timings against you. The Trickster is a killer that has been confirmed to receive a rework in the future, but even then, this version we have is still okay. He is the worst range killer in my opinion, as you need a lot more aim and time in order to injure survivors, especially in tall loops like the shack, where Trickster is very weak if you don't know what you're doing. But on the good parts of Trickster, he is and can be very strong. Catch a survivor in the open and there is almost nothing they can do to counter you. Main event completely melts the survivor health states in case they want to trade a rescue or body block, and even at worst, you can still play Trickster like an M1 killer as he has normal movement speed. But go against a survivor that knows what they're doing and is not afraid of you, and you will literally feel powerless. Trickster is very map dependent, as he is the best range killer on open grounds and dead zones, but absolutely horrible on indoor maps and maps with tall loops. The Wraith is a very simple killer to understand and use, with a surprisingly high skill ceiling that can actually match and give trouble to some of the strongest survivors in the game. At worst, he is a stealth killer with the best mobility out of the stealth killers that can catch survivors off guard while they are injured, which is not as common now due to the very fast healing speeds and high use of medkits, but at best, he can use his speed to body block survivors, cutting them during chase and getting free hits or using the speed boost in order to make some pallets unsafe, very notable especially with the increased pallet density, as a lot of them are unsafe by default. Of course, because of how popular Wraith is, survivors also understand how to counter him better, either by vaulting pallets and windows while you are cloaked, faking the pallet drops, or pathing in a way which prevents you from cutting them off. Overall, he is a very well-rounded killer, free to use, simple to understand, and he might become the new true neutral character that is the pinnacle of balanced fair killer design, as he is both fun to play as and fun to play against, as skill and build choices dictate the outcome of the match. New Myers is probably my biggest hot take in this entire list, and something that might age like milk in the future, but I generally do not see this shape rework to be weaker than before, as he is, in my opinion, stronger on base kit. I won't deny that at his best, he is weaker, because Tombstone Myers was very strong, but it was unhealthy for the game, just like styptics and syringes, so balancing a killer around an add-on is fundamentally flawed, and the reason why Myers and Trapper were always weaker in my tier lists. Myers is now finally a stealth killer, as he can choose to enter undetectable at will without needing to use Dead Rabbit or Monitor and Abuse like before, and on top of that, his Pursuer mode gives him various perks for free. I will absolutely admit that the Slice and Dice power feels much worse than in the PTB, but I don't think it is as flawed as people claim it is, unless the argument is that Slaughtering Strike doesn't fit Myers, where I will agree. The thing that makes Myers more powerful in my opinion is the vast amount of new builds that are actually viable now, like an Obsession build, a pure M1 build, an Infinite Tier 3 build, constant Global Aura Read build. Even the Scratch Mirror playstyle is stronger than ever in open maps in terms of power, as you can finally have launch attacks, you can get Bloodlust, and you are the fastest you have ever been. You even get Tombstone for free against Death Hook survivors, which can save you a lot of time if you catch them after they are healed, or you can use a down survivor to confirm a kill completely bypassing Decisive Strike or any attempts of survivors to save. You can even tunnel a survivor that is on second stage of Hook without needing Tombstone, which honestly was a completely waste of time before, as it was better used on a fresh survivor. And that's what I think makes Myers stronger, the fact that you are no longer stuck with one build if you want to have a chance at fighting good survivors, because the entire argument of Myers being stronger was based on Tombstone Peace. I am sure that Myers, with a bunch of changes, like the removal of the Stalking Depletion rate, making his Slice and Dice fast like in the PTB, bringing the stalking distance back to how it was, and also decreasing the time it takes to enter Evil Within, Myers would actually possibly be even an A tier in my opinion, as he is finally a killer with an interesting power and not just a stealth glorified M1 killer stuck in the C tiers for ages. So my argument and the reason why I put Myers on B tier is that at best he is worse because you can no longer abuse a fundamentally broken add-on to delete a survivor of the match, but overall he is stronger because you can use various builds and no longer are forced to run the same exact build every single match. Another legend that got a rework but thematically a much better fitting power is Freddy Krueger, who is no longer a joke as he actually has a decent power. Statistically speaking, he's also one of the most lethal killers in the game with the highest kill rate, mainly because he is an absolute poop stomper as his power is very complicated to understand for casuals. Even against the top dogs, I feel like Freddy is the most underrated killer in the game, as some players still claim that he is C tier for some reason. He has everything you need, a teleport that works on completed generators and even exit gates with an add-on. He also finally sees survivors with Killer Instinct base kit. He can use his powers on awake survivors in order to make them fall asleep faster. His snares are a very solid anti-loop power based on slowing the survivors down, and the explosive traps can allow Freddy some good misdirection to survivors using windows of opportunity as well as some cheeky hits. On top of that, he can become very oppressive if survivors heal while asleep, as Freddy can teleport to those survivors from anywhere in the map, immediately starting a chase. He is by all accounts stronger than before, as he is no longer powerless. Also, he finally has a good selection of add-ons, as all of them change his power in some way which allows for significantly better build variety options unlike before. Myers can be debated, but Freddy is objectively an upgrade overall. He still has some flaws on his power, like the fact that survivors can use clocks to ignore his powers, forcing Freddy to play like an M1 killer with a teleport. He also lost the ability to fake teleporting to gens as good as before. You can still do it, but it puts the power on cooldown as if you did teleport. Add to that the fact that his snares get completely countered by Vigil, a very popular perk in this meta, but I think this glitch will be fixed sometime soon, so I won't count it as much. These flaws prevent him from being an A tier despite his very high kill rate, as they can be exploited by good survivors that understand how to counter this nightmare. The clown became one of the most controversial killers back when they made his yellow bottles absolutely brain dead, while his purple bottles were left useless. Now in the latest patch, yellow bottles are okay and purple bottles are also okay, so it's a middle ground compared to the past clown. The thing that this does not change is the power of the clown in any way. He is still fundamentally the same clown that was ranked on my last tier list, a killer with a very strong chase that gets very underrated, but still a killer that puts all his eggs in one basket of lethality while leaving absolutely zero map pressure and map mobility. And now, with plenty of filler palettes, his biggest weakness, which was pre-dropping, is even more noticeable than before, so you have to use both bottles in order to make loops unsafe, and he still has nothing against survivors that just hold W besides using some yellow bottles to catch up, which can be a double-edged sword as you might need to reload during chase, wasting precious time. If you want to win as clown, you have to invest in your perks to carry you enough to slow down the match against survivors that decide to gen rush and play optimally. The Huntress is one of the killers that fell off the hardest compared to my previous tier list, despite getting buffs only, and the reason why is because she is no longer the best range killer in the game, as there is a killer that straight up power creeps her. Her strength still exists, as she is still very lethal and can down survivors insanely fast with good aim, and also she can snipe survivors with skill if the maps allow it, as she gets completely cocked in indoor maps. But her weaknesses are significantly more visible now due to how survivors are overall stronger. Her slow speed allows survivors to circle the new filler palettes, making her force the drop if she wants to get a hit. There is also more clutter spawning all over the maps now, which makes Huntress not able to hit the same snipes as she could before with more open maps. Also, she's the only range killer that doesn't have any big saving graces that the others don't already have, unless you count snipes, which can be done with Artist and now Unknown. she doesn't benefit from basic attack perks, she has no mobility to save her on big maps, and her camping abilities are matched with Trickster or any of the other ranged killers. Saying that Deathslinger is a better killer than Huntress is a very controversial take, as many of the comments found on my YouTube post, but I do think that currently with this meta, Slinger has a better chance against competent squads than Huntress does. This is because Slinger has what might be the individual best chase power in the game, which, as long as you hit your shots, you can make the vast majority of loops into a guaranteed hit, some of which are loops that are a nightmare to deal with the Huntress or Trickster due to the way their power works. On top of that, Slinger has one quality that the other range killers don't have, and that's the fact that he synergizes well with basic attack perks, as his power counts like 1. This means you can run perks like Surge and any exposed perk like Know It or Friends Till the End, which are very strong perks that can completely turn the tide of a match, allowing him more access to stronger perks and also the power to get carried by them, which is not possible for Huntress or Trickster. While he is lacking range compared to Huntress, and missing does force you to reload, which wastes distance, he is still, in my opinion, stronger than many players admit. A good Deathslinger will feel much more oppressive than a good Huntress, which can only beat him if you take orbitals and snipes into account, as her power is easier to react and dodge compared to Slinger's very thin hitbox. Slinger also has a power that kinda counters competent squads. The Deep Wounds effect prevents syringes and styptics from being used, counters Death Heart, and also if you shoot a survivor, you can move them away from pallets, preventing background player plays. The Unknown used to be an A tier killer, and as a main, I was a believer, but it is undeniable that its strength depends on the survivor's knowledge. If they don't know how to counter the Unknown, you will most likely demolish them, but if they do know, then you can start seeing the flaws that this well-designed killer has, and end up playing a killer that is very frustrating to miss with because a single mistake can fully reset your progress. It doesn't help that some maps have very funky collisions which make for unpredictable hits with the power, making this the most unpredictable range projectile in the game. Unknown's power is really good if you have good aim and fundamentals and know what you're doing, and the clones allow this killer to have a very strong presence all over the map, forcing survivors to be careful of your location and allowing you, at worst, to play as a macro M1 killer with zoning abilities and a very strong teleport power. But in this patch, and in this meta specifically, I cannot call Unknown an A tier anymore, even after the buff that allows for orbitals. The majority of their add-ons suck a lot, and in fact many of them got nerfed in this last patch, like Vanishing Box or Captured by the Dark, which got a very big shadow nerf. And on top of that, if you play this killer like a hit and run ambusher, which was my personal favorite playstyle, this is now very hard to do, as survivors can just reset in no time, killing all your pressure just by staring at you. This is a killer that requires a lot of effort to play, but doesn't get rewarded as much as literally any killer from the A tiers. This is why it is now coined as the Harmless by the Unknown mains community. The Xenomorph used to be an A tier killer and it got buffed compared to my last tier list, but the problem of Xenomorph is completely unrelated to the character. The reason why Xenomorph is lower, despite still being strong, is the fact that survivors are much better than before, so now they understand more clearly how to counter this killer. The Xenomorph has an amazing anti-loop power that is very strong when used right, but it can be shut down due to the annoying flame turrets which remove Xenomorph out of the power, forcing it to return to the tunnels to get it back, and which also sadly completely remove the ability of this killer to play in a stealthy way with no possible way to remove it, as there are no add-ons that mute these noises. Xeno still has an amazing map traversal power which also got buffed just like with Sadako, so the tunnels are located in much better spots, and low-key, I think Xenomorph is much better than before as it is no longer add-on dependent, and it also got a crazy good add-on, the Harpoon Gun, which is the strongest add-on this killer ever had. But it is undeniable that survivors now finally know that putting flame turrets in front of the tunnels is a very dumb idea, and they also know that putting double turret setups is kinda very good against this killer. The Cenobite is a very interesting killer in my opinion, in that it fully depends on the way you play him to showcase his true potential. If you play Cenobite like a normal chaser, he has a very unreliable anti-loop power that kinda sucks, and a slowdown that sometimes helps. In this state, he is almost a C-tier killer on the level of Pig, but if you decide to play him like the macro monster he is, you can now see how absolutely busted Cenobite can be. Playing fully around the box allows you to be very lethal against survivors, constantly forcing them to try and solve it in order to stop the chain hunt, which is the key here. If you play around the box, it is extremely hard to do anything as a solo queue team, as you need a lot of coordination and a lot of skill in order to loop a Cenobite. But if you're playing against a competent squad, that's when Cenobite starts lacking and you see his flaws. Of course, he also gets hindered in some maps. Get a small map and you will predict where the box is and catch survivors constantly. But if you get a big map, now interrupting the box is more complicated, and knowing where it spawns take more skill. Overall, I do think that against the average player, in the majority of situations, Cenobite is a very strong killer, almost A tier, but it is undeniable that some survivors are very good and finally understand how to counter this killer. Finally, we reach the above average category. These killers will be able to win the majority of matches as long as you play well, and you can have a chance against competent survivors too if you go all in with your builds and playstyle. Springtrap is finally in Dead by Daylight, and he came and immediately took the spot as the strongest range killer we have. The reason why is because of how many aspects to his kit he has, because the range projectile is just a choice. The axe is one of the best zoning attacks in the entire game, as you barely lose speed while holding it and don't lose much distance cancelling it, and even if you miss, you still get tracking and you become normal speed so you can play like an M1 killer. If you do get a hit on a survivor, now you also become a normal killer and can continue the chase normally until you grab the survivors, saving a lot of time. Or you can just recall your axe and kill survivors like a range killer again. This is just one aspect of his power, as he also has the doors, one of the best map mobility powers in the entire game, as you can always use them. They spawn next to generators and are available at the start with no limits. The counter is that survivors can also use these doors, but if you catch them using the doors, you will automatically grab them for free. And on top of all of that, he has stealth, which sadly is not as noticeable unless you are using the glitch trap skin because of how loud Springtrap is. But it is undeniable that free stealth every time you teleport is kinda insane, when other killers don't have this privilege. And it's not just short stealth like Demogorgon, it's a full 20 seconds. Now despite all of this, I was debating on putting Springtrap lower as a B tier, because he does have counters. For example, survivors can't tell when you are teleporting to them on doors. They can use the cameras to see you with wall hacks, the projectile is easy to dodge as it's very hard to aim from far away, and there are tricks like survivors entering doors to force a decisive strike, which puts the killer in a lose-lose situation. So even if I think Springtrap has a decent chase power and insane mobility, which are keys to be an above average killer, I would not be surprised if people say that he is B tier. I know that this placement is going to give me a lot of flack, but after playing Nemesis for so long and winning so many of my matches too, I cannot rank Nemesis on the same B tiers as he was before the buffs to his power. Nemesis is genuinely a new addition to my play with the brain turned off list of killers that I adore. His power is very simple to use, especially when you get the hang of dragging the whip to get some nasty hits. And now, having 3 health states is not as punishing, as survivors barely get any distance compared to before. On top of that, now you get tier 3 even faster, allowing you to demolish pallets on your way like those added on this patch. And on top of that, Nemesis also comes with inherent slowdown thanks to the zombies, which can help you without you putting any input yourself, but also they can be useless. For that reason, I think Nemesis is an A tier killer overall, because he is very easy to win without putting as much effort as killers like Unknown or Cenobite, where they have to jump through 5 hoops just to get a down by learning trigonometry, when all you have to do as Nemesis is pull the tentacle, whip survivors, break pallets, arguably the easiest anti-loop power in the entire game to use in my opinion, and you also get slowdown for free. Albert Wesker has always been one of the most popular picks for killers because of how fun he is to play with and his strength, but sadly I feel like people are learning that he's kinda lacking, especially when compared to some of the newer releases that get much more with much less effort. Wesker is awesome. He has a mobility, a strong chase power that is simple to understand, but also a very high skill ceiling as proven by his mains. The issue is that Wesker is not as rewarding to play compared to the difficulty of doing his techs. Hug techs, for example, are frame perfect inputs and most of the time are just done for show. Wesker in reality has a very long cooldown that you have to decide on whether to use for mobility or for chase, and compare him to killers like Blight or Krasue, which don't have to wait as long as Wesker and have a much more lethal attack, and you can see that anyone picking Wesker over them definitely is not doing that because of strength. I have heard a lot of people claiming that Chucky is a very weak killer after the nerfs, and while he is no longer a top tier killer, I will admit that, I cannot see him as anything but an improvement over Wesker. Chucky is a pocket Wesker that gets access to stealth to allow him to come close to survivors, access to a short stature which helps him hide in a lot of loops, and a third person camera which is a huge asset that allows Chucky to play some loops in completely different ways compared to others, like doing Chucky spots for example. His dash is brain dead easy with short cooldown, very lethal and strong now that doing scampers is faster, can be used to bait Death Heart and avoid body blocks, which is something the majority of killers cannot do, and that's the reason why I cannot see him anywhere in B tier. He's so easy to play compared to how lethal he is and how hard he is to play against. A lot of people base him around the dash attack, but they completely ignore the fact that him being so small and having a third person perspective is a huge advantage in chase. The only weakness Chucky has in my opinion is obviously his very lacking map mobility, but he compensated so much with the insane lethality he offers and how easy it is to get access to it. Another new addition to my tier list is the Houndmaster, a killer that has it all, which also includes a power that most of the time doesn't work, and even then she is pretty strong. She has really good map mobility thanks to the search command of Snug, which also allows her to track survivors with it, so you can take it as a double deal, which is awesome, already putting her above a simple M1 killer. But she also has a very strong anti-loop power in the form of the chase command, which can be redirected, allowing Snug to bite survivors in some crazy ways, and it also has a very small cooldown so you can almost spam it. Not only Snug jumps vaults, this can also bypass pallets too, allowing Houndmaster to break pallets and get a hit on survivors at the same time, which is the reason why her biggest counter is to camp pallets and get a stun or help your teammates if she snipes them with Snug, something that luckily not all survivors know yet because of how rare she is. Most importantly, she is just like Deathslinger in that she benefits a lot from basic attack perks because her power counts like 1, so she can use perks like the exposed ones or Surge, which combines really well with her. But she can run anything, like gen slowdown, gen blocking, aura perks, hex perks, even stealth perks. This overall makes her a really solid killer choice that works for the majority of situations, but like I mentioned, it's hard to ignore her bugs. Sometimes, Snug will just disappear when you want to use your power, making you potentially lose an entire chase. Or sometimes, Snug will just not work, but even with these bugs, I win most of my matches, which just proves that maybe survivors are lucky that this character is so broken. The artist used to be one of my picks for an S tier killer, mainly because of how much I love her and how many hours I spent playing her, but it is undeniable that this killer, just like the Unknown, is more of a potential to be an S tier than actually being an S tier. She has a lot of flaws, especially when compared to recent releases that make you wonder why she was designed in such a hostile way. For starters, her cooldown for the birds is very long compared to other projectile killers, so missing them or using them incorrectly can punish you a lot and waste a lot of your time. Her biggest objective strength is using the birds to completely cancel loops, which only has a counter of survivors holding W, allowing them to dodge the birds if they are good. I have even seen survivors body blocking others from the birds, which is insane. And the other good aspect of her were the snipes. which are so much worse now as survivors finally saw how to counter videos and learned that all you have to do to completely invalidate her power is to just enter a locker, and that's it. Her entire pressure vanishes. She is just a killer with many flaws, even though I think her power has an insane amount of potential, allowing her to be very lethal and play the game in a very macro-centered way. But what is the point of playing Artist when you can get better results easier by playing other killers higher in the list? No wonder she has such a low pick rate. Vecna used to be a B tier killer in the past, the reasons behind it being the fact that his spells had a lot of cooldown, so missing them was very punishing. Survivors could counter the spells if they knew what they were doing, items countered Vecna a lot, and he would have to play like an M1 killer. But now that his spells have significantly shorter cooldown than before, and Fly got mega buffed, Vecna is now actually amazing, and I have won the majority of my matches even against cracked survivors. Vecna's Fly ability now allows him to truly have a power that works both for mobility as well as catching up to a survivor after getting a hit, which is also now really easy thanks to how you can have your spells constantly available if you cycle them right. Flight of the Damned still has the insta-skeleton spawn tech, which allows Vecna to be extremely lethal, with the only counter being to actually predict that Vecna is going to use the power, as there is basically no time to react. And if you are a cracked Vecna and you get some maps with elevations, you can use the skeletons to snipe survivors too. Despite being such a complicated killer on paper, he seems so easy to get value of, and he combines with so many great perks too, as you can do any build you want on him. He got tracking, mobility, lethality, and thanks to Mage Hand, the ability to counter god loops like Dr. Khan, so he literally has everything you need to play against competent survivors. The only reason he is not S tier for me is because you can still make mistakes, especially with Mage Hand, forcing your spells on cooldown, and good survivors can counter the spells if they know what they're doing, but this is not common, which is the reason why Vecna has one of the highest kill rates in the entire game. In a meta where healing is king, a killer that can completely bypass that would obviously be very high in the list. The Plague has always been strong, but now that she can completely ignore perks like Resurgence, Botany Knowledge, or many of the other busted healing options survivors have, along with the entire medkits, so they can no longer depend on those clutches, the Plague is shining even more than before. And thanks to her fountains by default, she could end an entire match with just one use of the power. Survivors have a choice. Should they heal, giving you one of the strongest time-limited powers in the entire game, or should they stay injured and try to gen rush, which allows Plague to play like a lethal M1 killer that also comes with tracking by default. Nothing has changed from this killer, and I see no reason why she should be lower. The only reason she is not stronger in this list is because of the buffs that many killers received and how much more busted they are. What happens when you give a killer that was already considered top tier since release an actual choice of different builds and busted add-ons? You get the new Pyramid Head, which is once again objectively better than before in almost all aspects except the tunneling aspect, as now survivors do get endurance base kit, so you cannot immediately down them, making him a bit weaker on that. But he still can down survivors and tunnel them if you want, since you can execute them on the spot with Final Judgment. The new add-ons of Pyramid Head are absolutely crazy, some of which combine really well with aura reading builds, others which allows him to snipe survivors from afar. There is even one that is absurdly busted, where you can break pallets with Punishment of the Damned. Overall, there are so many more options that were impossible in the past, as all you had was range add-ons and that's it. Pyramid Head is and always will be a very strong killer that still can completely bypass anti-tunnel perks like Decisive Strike or Resurgence, or bypass save attempts with background player done by bully squads thanks to his cages. And this ability will always be strong in Dead by Daylight, which is why I never see Pyramid Head being any lower than B tier. The Oni got 2 changes since the last tier list. The first one is very small and it's getting more blood orbs for hooking, something that was done thanks to the slugging changes that were reverted. The other change is a massive increase to his flicks, so now he can hit survivors doing way crazier stuff, especially on console, but this can be annoying too. However, the Oni still suffers from some problems like he did in the past, and some are even arguably worse. His early game is still terrible, as he is just an M1 killer that needs to get a first hit very fast, and now thanks to the healing meta, blood orbs will spawn less around the map if survivors heal during your Blood Fury, as no other blood orbs spawn while you are on it. But this doesn't remove the fact that you can still end an entire match with 2 uses of Blood Fury if you know what you're doing, and since the slugging changes were reverted, you can still slug, which is very strong on this killer. As long as you have some perks to help you out in the weak early game, you will be set in the late game with the strongest individual time limited power in the entire game, giving you insane lethality and also insane mobility. The twins, just like Oni, are absolute monsters at slugging survivors, and in fact could arguably be so much stronger if only they didn't have 20 game-breaking bugs in every single patch that hindered their performance since release. Charlotte is basically an M1 killer that doesn't do much, but Victor is, in my opinion, by far the best and strongest individual killer power in the game, as there is basically no counter to him unless you miss. He is extremely fast, has no turn radius, has one of the easiest attacks to hit that bypasses pallets, and you can snowball the entire match by slugging everyone with one use of the power. The healing meta does affect twins a lot, as Victor is extremely strong against injured survivors, so now that they can reset this fast, twins are no longer close to the top 5 in my opinion. Twins are also very rare, so a lot of survivors don't know that the counter is to play together, so you can kick Victor or heal survivors fast to prevent her from pressuring thanks to slugging, which is an advantage. Overall, I feel like as long as you ignore the bugs, you should be winning the vast majority of your matches with the twins, and I think that they might have one of the best snowball potentials in the entire game, even better than Oni, as Victor has no time limit and can be spammed, even if survivors dodge or you miss the attack. The Spirit used to be an amazing S tier in the past, but the current killer releases are just power creeping this killer by a lot, especially if you count the fact that there are problems with the audio that give benefits to certain survivors. The Spirit is very lethal, even with her low speed, thanks to the phasing attack, which also doesn't count as a special attack, so she can be very lethal with exposed perks. She is also an accessibility nightmare, so if one of the survivors is legally deaf, they will be going down for sure, as there is no viable counterplay against her without sound. However, she doesn't combine very well with aura reading perks, and she is slow overall, so survivors can try to hide in order to prevent going down during chase. Iron Will is also a perk that hard counters this killer, even if it's not as extremely common as it used to be in the past. Overall, there isn't much new I can say about this killer, as she has not received any changes. It's just that nowadays, there are better options. But it doesn't mean Spirit is not an absolutely fantastic killer which you can win the vast majority of your matches with, as long as you have a good headset. The Singularity got a massive buff in the form of quality of life initiatives, as now he has a power that is significantly easier to use for everyone, as it comes with auto aim, removing a big skill floor aspect of this killer that limited him in the past. So for starters, this killer can track and teleport on top of you no matter where you are in the map thanks to his biopods, which also come with auto aim, so you don't even have to aim. Then, you can chase them with an insanely fast action speed bonus along with an insane vault speed bonus, and he combines really well with haste perks too and even exposed perks, because his attack is a basic attack. This insane pressure breaks the majority of survivor teams, especially the casuals and solo players that don't know how to play against Singularity. Singularity is also very strong in snowballing the match, as he is a beast at slugging survivors since they do not lose the slipstream infection when going down. Now on the other hand, good survivors can counter Singularity with good use of the EMPs, as they can disable biopods from afar or use them aggressively during chase to help their teammates. However, as a good Singularity, you can reapply the slipstream on them easily and just replace your biopods back. Another flaw of Singularity, and what keeps him from the S tier in my opinion, is how map dependent he is. Get an indoors map and it sucks massively, but get an open map and Singularity is arguably a top 5 killer. The Ghoul is another new addition to this tier list, and a very strong one at that. The Ghoul has the best mobility in the entire game, as you can cover the entire map no matter how big it is with just 2 Kagune leaps. He also has the easiest first hit in the entire game, as it's literally an auto-aim attack with very long range that is impossible to miss, completely dodging exhaustion perks and also putting survivors on deep wounds so you can completely bypass syringes, styptic agents and death heart, a massive bonus in this current meta. And on top of all of that, he can vault pallets and windows extremely fast while enraged, which allows him to bypass some very strong loops with nothing survivors can do if the pallet is downed, something that was even stronger back when the kidnap tech existed. Ghoul is extremely easy to play and requires survivors to be very good to counter, and this last part is the reason I don't see him as an S tier, because a good survivor can make Ghoul play like an M1 killer as you cannot down with your power, and Ghoul is loopable if you know what you're doing. However, this can also be a massive benefit for Ghoul, as he is also one of the only killers with insane mobility that also synergizes well with basic attack perks, so perks like Surge or Exposed builds are insane on him. Pick up Enduring with Brutal Strength, the Centipede add-on on top, and you have one of the nastiest builds which requires the lowest skill floor to use and give the highest reward ratio in the entire game. And unlike the new other killer releases, I don't think the devs will nerf Ghoul even more, making him the new Wesker of Dead by Daylight. And finally, we go to the last category on this video, the S tiers. These killers can compete with comp level squads doing clock callouts as long as you are good, and you should be able to go on very high kill streaks with them. I severely underestimated Dracula in my last tier list, as I rank him as an A tier in the 11th rank, but I have a reason why I did that, and it was purely a skill issue. See, the rest of players knew the trick to this killer, and I was playing using all of his forms, and the truth is that vampire form is by far the biggest pile of trash that's only purpose is to zone or get some nasty shots if you have the knowledge to do so. The true prize is in the wolf form, which is a better Chucky and Wesker for absolutely free. Wolf form allows Dracula one of the best chasing powers in the entire game, and it's literally one of 3 forms. He is small like Chucky, which allows for easier mind games. He has a third-person camera, which allows Dracula to see survivors like never before. He can track survivors for free and get a speed boost while chasing them, and his pounce attack allows him to shred pallets, zone survivors, and injure them, and is very hard to dodge even after the nerf. Wolf form is by far his best form, and it was sadly the form I used the least. Something you could tell on the B-roll footage while I was talking about Dracula on my last tier list. And then, he has absolutely crazy mobility with Bat form, which allows him to move all over the map and teleport to vaults, giving him insane mobility in 2-floor and indoor maps. On top of that, Bat form can be used offensively as a chase catch-up tool, as you can bypass everything, including other survivors and pallets. So overall, Dracula has every single tool needed to dominate. And then, Dracula can penetrate survivors using flame pillars, making him very lethal when defending hooks in the endgame, but not on the level of some other killers. Still, he is very strong as long as you spam wolf form, which is the form you should use in 99% of the match along with bat form. The Hillbilly is for me the hardest killer from the S tiers, as you have to be good if you want to get results with him, but the results you get are absolutely cracked. He has unconditional mobility that is combined with insane lethality, allowing him to confirm a kill in the endgame with nothing survivors can do, which is a huge asset. The thing that makes Hillbilly very lethal is similar to Cenobite, in that if you don't know how to play him, he is an okay killer that has very strong mobility all around the map. But if you are good at Hillbilly, you can get some very nasty curves that can end chases faster than some of the other S tiers. He is very strong since the Overdrive update, and even stronger if you give him insane add-ons like Loper Chains or the Engravings. However, the only reason I decided to put him lower than in my last tier list is because of indoor maps, which for some reason have become more popular now. Since map offerings are no longer viable, and since a lot of the offerings used were for maps that were open in general where Hillbilly thrived, this means you will be playing on RPD, Larry's and the game, which is more annoying than before. Even some maps like Toba have weird collisions which affect his power. The Krasue was a killer that was considered a high A tier back in the PTB, and now that she is out on live, the devs decided to give her 10 entire buffs to her power. This has resulted in the Krasue taking the entire game by storm, completely demolishing survivors with an extremely easy power to dominate with. For starters, her speed attack is very spammable, makes you barely lose distance, you can attack immediately out of it, and it also comes with auto aim, so you don't even need skill to hit survivors with the shotgun speed that happens after you hit a wall. And then once they are infected, the game is over, and the survivors should try to die in a corner to make you waste your time. There is basically nothing you can do as a survivor to the current Krasue head form. She has insane unconditional mobility that works in every single map, can vault windows and pallets out of the flight form easily, can completely bypass god pallets, making some survivor-sided maps into killer-sided, can slide through walls like a Demogorgon that is fully lubricated, getting hits that even Wesker dreams of, and on top of all of that, she moves at 120% while having the best third-person camera in the entire game, which is also one of the biggest advantages this killer has, because it is basically impossible to hide against her or do anything, as you can see survivors even in the tallest of loops. And the thing that fully confirms she is an S tier to me is how easy she is to use, and how she barely gets punished for misplaying, something the other killers cannot boast about. The only true counter this killer has is the fact that body blocks can completely hinder her during chase, forcing her to either attack the body blocker with head form, which is a complete waste of time, or transform back to human form, which takes time too. But this still shows that she is extremely broken, as there is nothing you can do as a solo Q. With Blight and Nurse, it fully depends on you and your 1 vs 1 skill on how long you last in chase. With Krasue there is nothing. If she is bad, then obviously you will last in chase, but that's not on the killer power. But if she is good and you have no teammates to help, you are done, and you should die in a corner, so at least you give survivors some time. She will obviously get nerfed sometime soon, so maybe by the time you're watching this, she is already back in the 8 years. If she released as she was in the PTB and with some improvements, I am confident on putting her somewhere close to Twins and Oni. But that fully depends on what the devs want to do, because maybe she could be even gutted like Chucky was. The Blight is and will always be a killer with a fundamentally strong power, as mobility is king in this game, and he has by far the best mobility based power out of all of them. In fact, it can be argued that with brutal zoning, Blight can be even stronger than Nurse, but the reason I put him as a second best is because he can be very bad on certain indoor maps like RPD, which are very annoying to face in my opinion. But even with that, Blight is just objectively strong. He can end chases incredibly fast, hook a survivor, and be on the other half of the map in no time. If there is someone there, he can just catch up to them and down fast, and if there isn't, then he can return to hook to pressure the rescuer or tunnel the survivor off hook. No matter what happens, Blight has an answer to everything, and even at worst, you can use him as an M1 killer, which is something you cannot do with Nurse. Who would have expected that the killer that has been busted ever since her introduction in the game would still be the best killer in the game 8 years after? Literally nothing has changed from this killer other than the fact that sometimes she cannot use her second blink in this patch, so technically speaking she is indeed worse than before, but this is a bug that hopefully will be fixed soon, and this is only a short joke in this video. I think the only thing that could nerf this killer is if they make it so that she gets blinded whenever she charges a blink, removing her amazing synergy with aura perks like they did back in the days by removing her synergy with exposed perks. That day, maybe I will rank Nurse like the second best instead of the best. But current Nurse has no counter in my opinion, as it all depends on the skill of the killer player. If they are bad, you will most likely escape as Nurse is forced to use her power, which explains her low kill rate. But if they are good, it's a good game, as there is almost nothing you can do against a killer with the best chase power in the entire game regardless of map, a power that is also surprisingly easy to use once you get the muscle memory for it. And that was my tier list of this year. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and a huge thanks to my members for helping me out in making such long videos like this. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a nice day.